Hey everybody, just want to welcome you back for day two of the Journey into Tech series. My name is Dominique and I'm your host tonight. Hope that we have a good audience of we happen with these events. So just want to say shout out to all of y'all for taking the time to come and hang with us. Time is a valuable resource and we really do appreciate y'all spending some time with us. Today we have another doozy of a person that we want to introduce you to. But first, in the comment section, just let me know where everybody's from, what you're doing now. Okay. So now we're going. So now, first of all, thank y'all for taking the time to drop where y'all from. I see a couple of people from NYC, and I know a couple of people are sliding in. But I want to take a moment to introduce our guest. His name is Alex Paul. He's a senior software engineer at the New York Times. My apology. He was actually at one of our speed mentoring events, and he got a lot of great reviews for just his knowledge and how he approaches situations. So I want us to give us a round of applause for Mr. Alex Paul as I bring him up to the stage now.
Hello, hello, hello. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Dom. Thanks Chanel. Thanks Mentor Me Collective. Thank you all for having me. Very excited to showcase my talk today around iOS engineering and my work at the Times and my journey into tech.
Oh, but before we get into that, we would love to hear more about you. Who is Alex Paul? Where did you grow up? When did you discover your love for tech?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Let's start from when I was a baby. No, let's fast forward. Um, let's see. I grew up in St. Lucia, small island. Actually, we won our first medal this year at the Olympics and second medal as well by the same person this year at the Summer Olympics. So that's big, big, big for St. Lucia there. Julian Alfred, shout out to her. Yeah, so I moved over to the States when I was 19 seeking better opportunities, college, etc. Started my college career at Borough of Manhattan Community College, BMCC, down in Manhattan, with 2 years there, and then transitioned into a four-year college to complete my bachelor's, New York Institute of Technology, for another 2 years, and then a better of a decade. It took me a while to get sorted out, documentation-wise, work authorization, da da da. Fast forward 2015, that's when I started my career in tech at a small startup in Chelsea doing iOS development. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, I was on mute. My apology. We had technical difficulties. But no, it sounds like you have a lot to offer, and so I know you have a bomb presentation. So I want to leave the floor to you. Let's get started.
Awesome, sounds good. All right. Again, reintroduction. Alex Paul, senior software engineer at the New York Times. My definitely I'm enthusiastic about swim, bike, run. So I do Ironman races, I do marathons and stuff like that. When I'm not coding. So here I over the weekend swam at beach in Long Island. Did a bike on Sunday and then did a run afterwards. So yeah, just trying to stay active while not coding. Actually, I think of coding while I'm being active. So there you go. It's a win-win. Our agenda today, we'll go through a series of topics. Anybody who's joining in probably see the same sort of like overview of our tech career and what we do. We'll talk about my role, skills and knowledge of an iOS engineer, especially being on my team, certifications and tools, certifications I came across when I was doing iOS learning and still learning. We never stop learning. Stakeholders I encounter on my day to day. I'll go over some projects or some UI layouts and stuff I worked on. And then we'll kind of wrap it up with career advice, like what I think is valuable through my tenure of either teaching or just like mentoring or being a mentee, either or just like career advice in general for software engineering and especially like transitioning from careers. We'll go over my employment history here. So quickly, as I said to Dom earlier, I started off in construction, right? So when I got to the States, it was a bit of a journey. for lack of a better word. So I couldn't go into school right away. So here we are. In '97, I got in the States, New York. So I've been in construction since then to 2015, right? So working my way through school, um, undergrad, did my associates at Borough of Manhattan Community College for 2 years, then worked some more, got some more funding for college. I got a small scholarship for New York Institute of Technology, but it wasn't enough, right? So I kept working construction while paying for school, rent, books, all the stuff, all the expenses. And then kind of at 2015, Eureka moment happened, right? So I was able to get my work authorization documentation sorted out. So at that time, I was working on iOS apps anyway. So 2011 was when I got my first iPhone. I think it was the iPhone 3GS. So I picked up a coding book. It was Objective C first because I needed to learn the language, and then I picked up an iOS book as well. I think it was by Big Nut Ranch or one of those publications. Taught myself core data, very complex framework there, and then published my first app. All doing that while in construction. So I was able to publish that app, and that app actually got me my first opportunity for a job, and that job was at Swarm NYC. So the app was called What Paint, and it enables you to catalog paint colors on a project. So I was doing a lot of interior renovations and stuff like that. So I caught myself always trying to figure out what a color is. So I basically took the color code, put it into the app, and then based on the room, based on what part of the room, catalog the colors. So that way you could come back 5 months later or a year later and know exactly what color you used. So you could go to Benjamin Moore and then just pick the color. So that got me my first opportunity as an iOS engineer at Swarm. So Swarm was a small startup agency in Chelsea, in-house. So they did design, they did consultation, they did Android, iOS, web as well. So I was one of the three iOS engineers there at the time. And there I spent the better of 2 years. And at that point, I was seeking other opportunities. So I think I came across a listing. It may have been Craigslist or somewhere where I came across a listing for iOS iOS instructor. And what really resonated with me was the fact that it was underrepresented community members like myself, like immigrants, people of color trying to get into tech. So I picked up that job description and really drew me in. So I went over to Pursuit. At that time, it was called Coalition for Queens. I went over, got interviewed, um, went through. Actually, the interview process was pretty cool. Some people might think it was too long, but to me, it was very, very cool, especially looking for an instructor that has good chemistry with the classroom. So the interview part of the interview was to actually have a lesson, like teach an actual lesson to a classroom of 35 students at the time. And my lesson was on, I think it was on delegation, one of those tricky topics. So to be able to break that down to an audience that never did programming or iOS development was a bit tricky. So it was a challenge that I really look forward to. So I was able to give an hour and a half-ish lesson to the class. And obviously part of the interview process was, do the students resonate with you, right, as an instructor? Do they have confidence in your learning style, in your knowledge? So I was able to get that job at Coalition for Queens at the time. And then later it became Pursuit Transformation, which totally makes sense for the name, like transform you into a tech expert. So started iOS instruction there in December of 2017. And the program itself, if I want to talk about Pursuit, so it's a 10 month program. We take, again, no prior knowledge for iOS or programming or anything tech, right? So we start off with basic of iOS, not even iOS, but Swift itself, like the fundamental language of Swift. What's a function? What's a property? what's a variable, right? What's a constant? So going through that for a few weeks, and then going through your first actual iOS app where you integrate everything that you know from basic fundamentals into, hey, I could actually have a button on my iPhone. This is so cool. And then we have a hackathon, and then it ends with a capstone project where we have groups of students showcase their work to external stakeholders and also the family members, right? Like you've been out for 10 months, 10 to 6. What have you done, right? Like what have you learned? So that's really, really amazing to see the projects the students build. Um, COVID came, right? 2021. So unfortunately, Pursuit had to cut a program. At that time, when I started, we had three programs. We had Android, iOS, and web. Android got cut again because of businesses. It just made sense to, at that time, there's not too many Android entry level positions. So unfortunately, Android got cut from the program. And then when COVID hit, with funding being small at the time or cutting down, then we had to cut iOS as well. So with that, I was still supporting the fellows looking for jobs, etc., etc. But I needed to make a decision as to what's my next, right? Like, where do I go next? And I interviewed with a few companies, and two of those companies gave me offers. And one of the companies that gave me the offer was the New York Times. And the interview process too here, some people again might think it's too long, but in my opinion, it gave me a chance to really see the demographics, the culture of the Times. So I think I went through like 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, and then really resonated with everybody I interviewed, the process itself. And I had those two offers, so I was trying to figure out, should I go to A or B? And I went with the Times with the Times, even if the next opportunity there was more compensation there. But I really felt like the Times was the place I would be for the next, 5, 10 years, as far as like career opportunities, growth, mission, all that. So that's where I am. So I started as a software engineer, and then I got promoted to senior software engineer last year. So that's a bit of my employment history, and we'll keep moving here. Talk about my role at the Times. So I'm an iOS developer. I joined the growth team when I started, and still on the growth team. I enjoy the growth team. The growth team, our responsibility is of many to grow subscription, grow starts, conversion, reduce churn across our apps, meaning we want to give the users the best value and not have them cancel their subscription. We run a lot of A/B tests. It's a huge part of our workflow to validate our position with different layouts, different UI, different incentives, different ways to, again, promote our product across the board to our users. All people on the team are responsible for code reviews, right? So we need at least 2 PR approvals before we say we could merge into main or the integration branch we're working on. The app deployment and CI is handled by the platforms team. So if you're indie dev, you're doing everything from creating the app icon, probably, or giving it to a designer. But if you're, an indie like myself, when I was back in the day, I had my wife create my app icon. So that's not handled by us at all. So everything that comes with deploying the app to the App Store is handled by the platforms team. As far as like being an iOS engineer, nowadays the language is Swift. When I started, it was Objective-C. I have a dinosaur head to represent that, but Objective-C is still in some of our apps, and it's still around. So it's not, like I always say, languages don't die. Even during COVID, we saw COBOL. There was still some job openings for that during COVID there. So Swift is the modern language we use for iOS development. If you're learning iOS today, most probably you're learning Swift and Swift UI as the UI interface. UI Kit is still in our apps as well. And again, if you learn in iOS, you definitely want to learn some UI Kit because UI Kit, again, is still around. Xcode is the IDE. Being able to debug, being able to write tests using XC test framework is very, very essential. Being good at Git, also very essential because you'll be, pushing to GitHub, you'll be resolving merge conflicts. So really having a grasp on Git, or even like looking for an intro to Git, I think across the board for software engineers is very, very essential. And yes, DSA, data structures and algorithms, if you're looking for a job today, especially in a very challenging tech industry, knowing your data structures and algorithms is essential as well, because you could get in the jobs I interviewed for post pursuit, there was not data structures and algorithms being asked. They were all code challenges as far as like a take-home exercise, but not lead code problems. But those do vary, so you cannot leave anything to chance, for sure. Communicating with cross-functional teams is a huge, huge asset because as an individual contributor, you'll be tasked with talking to teams outside of the team on an initiative or some sort of feature that needs to be handled, and being able to communicate outside of just like your own silo is essential. Explaining technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders. For example, if you have a product manager or somebody in the newsroom or anybody like that, you want to be able to break down technical terminologies in a way that everybody could understand and appreciate. A thing I come across a lot, especially in my Jira tickets, is complex tasks, right? Like, how do I do X, right? So you see it, you're like, okay, take a pause. You need to break it down in small chunks. If the ticket, for example, like if you use Jira and the ticket is say 5 points, right? You want to take that and probably break it down in smaller tasks. That's why one, the PR is smaller. So when you make that pull request, you're not, making 1,500 lines of code change so somebody could go through and review. You want to break those down. So ideally, you probably want to have a PR that's like 500 lines or so. Be respectful of your fellow peer when they're reviewing your code there. Learning how to get unstuck, right? So being able to ask for help early than later. Like you're working, you're down coding, you're stuck. You're like, oh my God, how do I do this? You Google, you don't get anything. Like, take a step back and grab your fellow peer, if you like, in office, or if you're on Slack, if you do use Slack, like reaching out earlier than later to get unblocked is very, very important. The last thing your manager want to hear from you is, oh, I was stuck, but did you reach out to anybody? No, I didn't. I thought I would be able to solve the problem. No, you want to reach out early. You want to talk it over during your stand-up ceremonies or anything like that. That way, everybody, stakeholders involved, could help, right? So you want to reach out earlier than later. We use Stockit. Stockit is part of iOS, the iOS framework. So Stockit API is a huge, huge plus for being an engineer on our team because we deal with subscriptions, and subscriptions deals with purchasing, right? So if you're using like a third-party library or API or framework like a Revenue Cat or something like that, then most of that will be handled for you. But we're using native Stockit from Apple there. So being able to know Stockit is huge. A little about Stockit. So Stockit is Apple's purchasing API. On our team, we mostly handle auto-renewable subscriptions. So you subscribe to the New York Times using an auto-renewable subscription, which is known as an in-app purchase. In my day-to-day, when I'm working in Stockit, I'm not handling real money, right? So using testing, using Stockit configuration, that's a set of API tools that Apple made available to us about 3-4 years ago. So it's really useful as far as like speeding up the process of testing purchases, testing refunds, everything that has to do with the actual production purchasing you could do using Stockit configuration. There's some caveats here because we have our own internal tools, and Stockit configuration itself has limitations. The next closest thing to the actual production as far as like purchasing with in-app in-app purchases goes is Sandbox. So think about Sandbox as a staging environment. So you could give your build or your CI build to a QA engineer, and then that QA engineer is going to use this like staging Sandbox environment to test purchasing. And then right before you get to the App Store, you could use TestFlight again to validate purchasing there. Some certifications I came across in my journey, and tools I still use, and resources I still use. So Udacity, when I started, or when I knew I was about to get like my work authorization, my green card, etc., I sought like ways to more validate like I know iOS. So Udacity Nano Degree was pretty much new at the time, maybe 2014-ish. So I did do a Udacity iOS Nano Degree course. It was a great course. They didn't use GitHub for reviewing, but you were able to submit your projects and you were able to get feedback from the instructors at the time on your project. So that helped a lot. And I also did watch Stanford iOS courses, which was free, which I think still goes on. I think at least last year I saw the courses were being distributed. Instructor is really, really good. I think he actually worked at Next with Steve Jobs at some point. So if you're learning, definitely I recommend taking a look at the Stanford iOS courses because those are free to consume. Things that also keeps me up to date and just entertained in the iOS industry and just like software in general. It's not around anymore, but Build and Analyze by Marco Arment was a podcast I listened to like weekly, right? So anytime there was a new episode, I listened to it, and that kept me motivated and inspired to just like keep going as far as like I'm in construction. I want to change. I know at some point I'll get my authorization to work. So I know I just need to keep building, right? Keep building, keep listening, keep building up my skill set with iOS development. So Build and Analyze was a great podcast, but now he has Accidental Tech podcast. It's not always like iOS centric, but it's a really good podcast if you do resonate with that sort of vibe to listen to. Hacking with Swift is the next great resource to just dive into. It's by Paul Hudson. So there's videos, there's books, there's a lot there. There's even a subscription, a monthly or yearly subscription you could purchase to get like live coding sessions, I think on Saturdays or something like that. So Paul does a great job with as far as like in the iOS community. WWDC videos, I see those as evergreen, meaning they don't, the frameworks change, but the underlying concepts, like for example, Stockit, Stockit, well, there's original Stockit and there's Stockit 2 now, but the same terminologies exist, right? APIs change, so on and so forth. But I catch myself going back to Stockit videos when our product manager says, hey, let's try this new win-back initiative or whatever it is, or free trial or whatever it is. Take a look at those. And even the sample code that Apple provides at every WWDC, or even sometimes in Tech Talks, are very, very valuable. So I take a look at those. Even my most recent project, I was able to look at some Apple sample code to delve into a possible solution for one of the problems I was having. So that helped a lot. Last year as well, I took a certification from this site called iOS Lead Essentials. And that's a certificate. It took me about 4 months to complete it. It's a robust certification that takes you through fundamentals of just like test-driven development. So everything you do is test-driven, from network to everything. Also talks about design patterns, architectural patterns, singleton, pros and cons. Really, really good. How to modularize your code. Um, yeah, so very, very good if you're looking into getting like a certification. And there's different tiers. I think I completed at a blue belt or brown belt. Yeah, so there's different tiers of where you complete um, there. As far as stakeholders I encounter on a day-to-day workflow, our team, we have a designer, we have a product manager, we have QA, data analyst. So the designer will hand you the Figma, and then from that Figma, you will go ahead and work on that layout or whatever UI you're working on. QA, very, very essential part of our work stream. So when I'm done, I hand out a build to our QA team, and the QA team goes through a functional test, right? So everything, all the use cases, all the test cases have to be checked. If there's any story bugs, those have to be fixed before anything could go out to the release. And even when it's done, it goes like a regression test. So very, very important stakeholder there. I did talk about purchasing. So part of our stakeholders, we have offer management team. They're responsible for setting up IAPs in our purchases and configuring them. So if we're working on a new landing page and we have new SKUs, they're the ones responsible for that. And data analysts, like you have a set of UI, you want to make sure impression events, you want to make sure interactions are happening, exposes, allocations, the variant sizes are correct. So data is very, very important. And as I mentioned as well, our CI/CD team is the apps platform team. They're handling deployment. They're handling if you have a new device and you want to have the news app run on it, apps platform is handling that. Some projects I've worked on over almost 4 years. Time flies. At the times, I brought free trial to all our apps, our iOS apps. Currently, we have audio, cooking, we have audio, cooking, news, and games. So some of those have free trial on them, and also that's part of Stockit. So that was a very, very nice, challenging, and gratifying project. Working on all the landing pages in our mobile apps, mentioned churning. So one way to combat churning is through winback, being able to provide the user, if they're canceled or canceling, an opportunity to get an offer to keep our journalism work incentivized. I'll go through high level what it takes to say work on a UI like this landing page here in the news app. So we have authentication. So example, we see login here. If the user is a current user, you want to be able to log in using your current credentials. If not, you want to create an account. So we have authentication. If that app is deployed and you want to change text with mobile apps, you don't want to wait till app review handles the change. As opposed to web you could just deploy quicker, but in mobile, you want to be able to change before an app release. So being able to have remote configuration in place is huge. So that way I could say change the icon, remove an icon, change the text, add more value props. So all that could be handled by remote configuration. Stockit in our purchase. Here we have two buttons, two subscription buttons. We have an intro offer on it. So here you see there's a strike through so that user will get an intro offer for 6 months at $3.99 if they choose the monthly, or $49.99 if they choose the yearly plan. There's also pay as you go, pay up front. As I said, Stockit is huge and has a lot in there. Could be a course by itself. So this landing page is designed using Swift UI. Language is Swift. There's also some UI kit here because it's a legacy. This app has been around for a while. So we have UI kit there as well. We are working towards having everything in Swift and Swift UI. But as I said, you cannot shy away from UI kit. It's there, not to stay necessarily, but it's there. So this particular landing page will go through design VQA, or visual quality assurance, to make sure everything is spec with the Figma design. So if there's anything that's typography or spacing or padding that's not aligned, you get feedback from design saying, hey, um, I need padding to be 20 here, or whatever the case may be. Also go through, DQA or data QA, where you click on the monthly button, you expect an interaction to be fired off. You purchase something, you expect a purchase event to happen, so DQA takes care of that. And as I said, functional QA is huge, because now they will be using Sandbox to test purchasing, right? If I do make a purchase, am I entitled to all the content of a subscriber in the news app? One of biggest accomplishments for the year, especially for me here, is working on Apple Podcasts and the NYT initiative. So here you have podcast subscriptions to access archive episodes of shows, for example, the daily. Also, if you're a subscriber, you get early access to content. So here to your left, you see, or to the center, you see the Apple Podcast app. If you are a subscriber, you could log in to your subscriber account. If you are not a subscriber, we take you into our news app, where you could make a purchase for podcast only or all access. Talking about career advice. So definitely staying motivated could be a challenge, right? So you're looking for a job, you apply, you're not getting anything back. So being able to stay motivated, as I said, for me, it was like listening to build and analyze while doing construction, right? So those things keep you engaged, keep your your eye on the ball, right? Like, you want to be inspired, whether it's like going to meetups, talking to fellow peers, also looking for work, or so those are the opportunities where you could team up with somebody. Whether it's like, for me, I teamed up with fellow attendees to some of those meetups back in like 2012, whatever it was, on Stand for the Silence, right? So we were able to team up and just like work through assignments, the challenges, help each other out, and really feel, accomplished at the end of the day. So being able to network, and when you network, you don't necessarily just want to say, hey, are you hiring, right? If you're hiring, what are you looking for from a junior developer? What are you looking for from a mid-level developer? What are you looking for from a senior developer? Whatever the case may be, right? You don't want to just be like, oh, are you hiring? If you're not hiring, then you're not engaged. You want to go deeper than that. You want to see what the person is looking for, right? If there's no opportunities, like what sort of, features, or what does my resume look like? What should I be working on? What apps should I be working on? Staying updated with news is huge. So for me, I subscribe to iOS Dev Weekly. It's a great newsletter. So like every Friday, it's in my inbox. I go through it, see if there's anything that resonates, see if there's anything I want to go deeper into. Building projects, I can't stress that enough. Anybody who knows me from Pursuit or Coalition for Queens knows I always talk about building projects, right? Build, build, build. You could watch a tutorial, you could watch many tutorials, you could go through books, but unless you build your own project, you won't be able to be, you won't get stuck, right? Get stuck in the meaning that the tutorial has an answer, right? At the end of the tutorial, there's a finished project. At the end of the book, there's a project, right? At the end of the chapter, there's a project. But when you're building your own app, you get stuck. You're like, oh my God, how do I make this code to that particular image I want, right? So then you start Googling, and then you're like, oh, okay, I could use this scroll view reader thing, whatever it is. So until you start building your own projects, you won't get deeper in APIs and frameworks. So I really stress like building, 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 put it on your GitHub, push it to the App Store, whatever it is, okay? And now you have ChatGPT, you could create your own icon. So there you go. This is just an accolade, just want to showcase, like, again, I'm in construction, 2000, 99, right? And now I'm meeting Tim Cook. So just like keep motivated, keep being driven, and then your goals, your dreams will come true. This is a resource I came across while working on this stock. It's getting started building iOS apps, right? So here in particular, it's a Swift coding club, but it's not necessarily just like a club. You could do this by yourself if you're trying to get into iOS development, or if you're just trying to get your next job. There's always a new way of approaching the problem. So take a look at this resource here by Apple, getting started building iOS. Also talks about Swift data as well and goes into some more advanced topics. So here is my contact. I was talking to Dom earlier. Definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. But huge sort of like the tip is when you're reaching out, feel free to mention like where you met me, whether it's like through this video, through mentorship, through speed mentoring, whatever the case may be, there. And I have archives, YouTube videos as far as like iOS development stuff. I try to keep it updated. GitHub has a lot of resources as far as like Swift UI, UI Kit, and data structures algorithms. So feel free to reach out on any of those platforms. Thank you all for coming viewing this video, whether it's like live or after. Feel free to reach out to me. Thank you, Chanel. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Mentor Me Collective.
No, well, we want to thank you, of course, Alex, for just this amazing session. I want to take you. First, I want to just thank you for going through all that. I think you touched on a lot of great things here. Also, I love the humble plug. You have to let people know, hey, for those scholarships, continue to network, continue to grow, and you too might meet one of these CEOs or just meet somebody, your hero. So, there's a first question I want us to get this going. What emerging trends in mobile development are you most excited about, and how do you see the future of iOS engineering evolving?
Definitely for me particular, I've been, like we set goals for the year on my team. And one of those goals is to get deeper into AI. So AI is coming, AI is here. Being able to grasp AI, whether it's like Xcode 15 that has AI in there. So being able to leverage what AI has in a developer world. With VS Code, you have Copilot, but Xcode now has Assistant, which is coming. So being able to leverage AI in our development workflow, I think is going to be big. Like moving faster, right? Developing faster with AI.
Well, let's transition to the next question then, because I'm happy you touched on AI, and we're not talking about Allen Iverson, everybody. How do you think
practice?
We're talking about practice. You should be practicing your GitHub and everything and making sure that you have them smoothed out.
Exactly.
But how do you think AI and machine learning will impact mobile development in the next few years?
Great question. So again, I think with Xcode and AI, I could see in the next, again, that's my optimistic thinking about where Xcode IDE will be. But I'm thinking the testing suite will be simpler to have a prompt, just say, hey, I have a new UI, write some tests against this UI, as opposed to like writing a whole verbose set of test suites for currently as we do. I'm thinking it could be prompt driven. Like you could have snapshot testing, prompt driven snapshot testing with AI, right? As opposed, because it's boring work for lack of a better word, right? Like developers are writing tests where it's pretty much boilerplate, right? So why not have an AI tool do that for you? Again, I think VS Code is moving, not VS Code, but Copilot is moving faster than like I want Xcode to move with like AI tooling. But I'm hoping that Apple catches up. Obviously, Coding Assistant is, I think, still in beta in the latest Xcode. But I think come fast forward to next year when we talk again about this, hopefully it moves faster. Because I think I myself, like I do sometimes use VS Code alongside Copilot. and what it gives me is huge. So being able to do this in my IDE with Xcode, I think, would be a huge benefit for developers. Um, and right now, I think it's not there yet for iOS developers using Xcode, but I'm hoping in the next 1, 2, 3 years it gets there. And I think it gets there with, as I said, things like testing, for example, where the AI, test suite or whatever you call it, as you're working on the UI, the the AI is intelligent enough to say, hey, you have a button centered. Let me just have a test for that right away. And you yourself as a developer could validate, do I want this? Do I want to tweak it or not? So I think, again, future thinking, that's where I kind of want iOS development to go.
And I think it will, because in the tech sector, once something new is unleashed, you're already 2 or 3 years behind. So I think like it's growing at an interesting pace. So I think, to your point, in this couple of years we should see those innovations happening, and they might be already
Optimistic.
happening.
Yeah, optimistic. I'm really hoping. Because this year I was already hoping, and then what I saw was still kind of beta. So we'll get there.
Eventually, like that's what it takes, a little extra work, but we're all going to get there. I
And
want
I
to.
just
Go
wanna
ahead.
shout out one other conference. There's a TriSwift AI. So TriSwift is a iOS conference. So the person who's holding that will have next year in New York, and there's some other locations, I think Copenhagen. But there'll be an iOS and AI conference. So I'm hoping this gives us a better dive into what's coming and what's available. Because that's like one of the things you have to push to your, for example, me to my manager or my to say, hey, I'm not doing that right now, but I want to position myself for what's coming, right? Whether it's like learning, having machine learning specialization part of my goal for the year. It's not necessarily tangible today, right now, but that's like where we headed. So having iOS plus AI together is, a big goal of mine. This year it was, next year it will be. Yeah.
No, no, most certainly, and I think you touched on something, just an ever evolving thing, right? So I'm happy you're shouting out these conferences too, so people can kind of come in and see like what new things will be coming on. Actually, our lovely Chanel Power dropped this question that I would love you can answer. You mentioned peer reviews. Can you help our viewers understand how to leverage feedback from co-reviews for knowledge growth?
Yeah, for sure. So I think an ideal review, they will give you feedback and maybe give you a resource that you could brush up on. For example, if you telling some or advising a peer that you have a memory issue in this particular chunk of code, the best way to approach that is, oh, you have a memory issue in this chunk of code. You could double check this resource that might get you up to speed as far as like best memory practices, that kind of thing. So I think being able to write reviews like that, like empathetic, right? Like giving the review plus like a resource. So even like if a peer is giving me resources, it's the same way. Like if you're giving me feedback and the why or the how I could learn more about that feedback is good in my opinion.
Well, to follow up with that, she also asked, how can junior engineers improve their code structures or optimizations in this particular instance?
Great follow-up question. So in that particular question here, I would say as far as code structure goes, nothing beats looking at the broader app that you're working on and see previous PRs or see how the code itself is structured. And if you are writing a new feature that's not anywhere structured in the code itself, then you definitely want to reach out to the architect or Slack and ask more about it. But looking at the code itself, it's like a living document, right? So you want to look at the code itself and see how it's structured too there.
That's very good. So then, while we're on the subject of just teaching and helping one another, in terms of like mentorship, right? Well, if someone were to come to you and ask you what skills or habits have been most crucial to your success in the tech industry, what would you say?
I would say always learn it. Like I catch myself no matter how fundamental, like even the resource I shared earlier, right? I myself, at some point, I'll look at that resource and see, oh, the Apple developers are doing this a bit different than what I'm doing, and I might piggyback on that, right? So I think I don't want to say you're never too old to learn, right? But you always want to keep learning. Whatever you wrote 2 years ago, a month ago, might not be what you want to write today. Swift is evolving. Right now, we're on Swift 6. So that's the thing. We always want to go back to Swift.org, look at the Swift handbook to always be up to date with where optimizations and performance and tweaks, changes in the language is. So as far as like that goes, you always want to keep learning. So to me, I would always want to say keep learning, always keep learning. Like when your supervisor or whoever comes to you and say, "What's your goals for the year?" One of them should always be going deeper down in your craft, right? So whatever that craft is.
That's actually very good advice, and I think that's something we can all take away. When you stop learning, essentially, that's when you stop growing. So, and
Stop
especially,
learning and stop building, right? Like as I said earlier, like building a new app or building an app that existed will, like outside of your own work projects, you want to, because your work projects come to like libraries that's given to you. Like you don't write vanilla apps like that. So writing a vanilla app will show you or will guide you into what's new in the language, whether it's like Xcode or whatever.
so I want to just segue into that, right? So when it comes to just mentorships in general, you came to one of our events, the Speed Mentor event, when you got to talk to different people about where they were at and what they were searching for. Have you like what would you say is the best thing? What's the best piece of advice that you can give to people trying to come into the industry now as an iOS engineer?
Like today, like they haven't done iOS at all.
They haven't done iOS at all. They come to you and say, "I'm interested in this. I would like to know more about it." What would you tell them?
The first thing I'll tell them is, first of all, what are the interests, right? Like, what are you interested in? Whether it's baseball, basketball, cricket, whatever it is. Okay, great. You're interested in something. Let us figure out your first project, right? Like, your small goal could be a simple, just one page UI, but start thinking of that app you want to build, whether it's like to solve a problem. Like for me, as I said, like my first app was called Workbench to solve a problem for me, right? I don't care if it was 1,000 downloads or whatever, but it solved the problem for me. So trying to solve a problem for yourself will get you hooked in iOS or Android or whatever. So for me, get something that hooks you, right? You want to build something to solve a problem. It could be a counter, it could be whatever it is. It could exist already. So now you have that interest. The next thing is, great, you want to learn iOS. Okay, now you want to pick up Swift, right? Because that's like the fundamental of iOS. You want to learn Swift, and to learn Swift, there's a lot of resources, right? Now you could get overwhelmed. The place to start, I would say, is Swift.org. Swift.org has the Swift documentation that takes you from very basic, right? Like what's a variable? So working yourself through the Swift docs would get you the fundamentals that you need. And at that point, you start writing, right? Then you could go to that resource I pointed out earlier in the video where it walks you through a Hello Swift UI project, like really fundamental, right? Get the blood flowing. And then work through that tutorial. That tutorial will get you very far. So as you start grasping knowledge about that, about Swift and iOS, then you could go back to like, oh, I wanted to work on my baseball app, right? Like to count whatever or home runs or whatever the task may be. But you want to keep it MVP. You don't want to go, full MLB app on day one, right? You want to keep it MVP, whatever MVP is to you, the smallest subset of that feature, and then you want to build that out. You build that out, you push it to your GitHub. Now you have a GitHub, right? Now you're understanding how to use GitHub if you haven't used GitHub. Then you start talking to your friends. Hey, I'm working on this app. You get feedback. Then you take that feedback. Some of it you might want to work on. Some of it you might be like, okay, put it in an ice bucket or whatever. So that's like some of the places I would start as like a day one person. Going down a tutorial sort of like hole, I think, could get a bit dangerous. Then now you're watching videos, you're doing things. It could help, but it has a limit. You want to stop that tutorial at some point and build your own project. So you could do a tutorial, that's great, but you want to do your own project, as I said during our video, because that's like where you get stuck, and then that's where you really start challenging yourself and trying to find the solution to a problem, whether it's on Google, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's like putting a prompt in and getting some feedback, whether it's like on a Slack community like Mentor Me Collective, you reach out on the general Slack or whatever, like reach out early than later.
And I would agree with that. So you touched on something that I asked you and you touched on something that I want you to go into a little deeper. Like you have stressed the importance of like somebody's GitHub account. Well, actually, before I get into that, I actually want to take Zed's question, which he said you mentioned continue learning, peer review, and practice. So how are you marketing your personal development?
Oh, how am I marketing my personal development? I use my personal as in me, correct?
Yeah.
I use LinkedIn a lot to showcase like what I'm working on. Before it used to be Twitter, but now we know where Twitter kind of went. So I use LinkedIn a lot. No matter how trivial the thing I'm working on is. Number one, showcasing what you're working on also gives other people like, hey, these guys looking at Figma. I'm gonna look at Figma too and get deeper into Figma and learning Figma or whatever it is. So sharing what you're working on, what it helps you build your brand or whatever personal development, and also let others see what you're working on as well. So never feel like something is too trivial, too small to share out to the wider audience, whether it's like LinkedIn or X or whatever platform you're on, or TikTok, whatever. Like keep sharing what you're working on. As far as like personal development, as I said, like year starts and then I have what I'm interested in. One, on my team, two, development. So for development for me, like things like Figma. I'm a developer. Why am I learning Figma? Well, I'm learning Figma to be a better developer, right? So putting things like that on your plate of challenges, of things to do, it spices up everything. It keeps you engaged, keeps you excited about development in general. You might want to create your own app, so knowing Figma might give you tools to create an icon or create a splash page. And also, I've been looking at animations with Lottie. So there's a lot of things I tend to bring up to my manager as far as like things I want to do for the team, for me, and then for my own career development. I mentioned AI. AI is like everywhere. So AI is like one of the things too I had early on in the year where I was learning specialized machine learning on Coursera with Andrew Ng. Very very in-depth course. So that's like one of the things I did too early this year. I did AI. What was it? Introduction to Generative AI, same by Andrew Ng. Got certified there. So I've done a lot of like AI initiatives this year, and right now I think I have enough tools to say, okay, I understand enough AI. I haven't built an AI, somewhat like a clone, call it a clone, but like a Chat GPT AI clone where I used the OpenAI documentation to build an iOS app using the documentation. So to generate an image and to do the same thing that ChatGPT does, but now you understand the API. So things like that gives you. And there's a next app I also built off of that, where I'm a runner, right? So I want to know what sort of clothing should I wear. So now I have this AI prompt in my code using the weather from the weather API, right? The Apple's weather API, weather kit is called, to generate the clothing I should wear. So whether I should have gloves, long sleeve, shorts, long pants. So all that like works together. So now I have this app on the App Store. I have AI in my tool belt. So all that stuff just like keeps motivating you, your goals, your development, and all that. So that's how I do it. Continued learning peer review. So I've been following your work with Vision OS as well, where I had a Vision OS app on day one. So those little things, it keeps you motivated as a developer. Because sometimes you do work I don't want to say the work could be monotonous, but there's times where things are not as challenging, right? So you want to at that point seek ways to stay motivated in the industry. I mean, some people look for work, like the transition jobs, right?
Hmm.
Or can you talk about a recent project you've done with that framework? Yeah, that's the same app I did. So it was um, using the Chat GPT API and having so picture like you have Vision OS on you. I mean, you have the Vision Pro on you. You're in your kitchen. You're about to go run. You pull up my app, and then it shows you the weather. It shows you what sort of clothes you want to wear, that kind of thing. So that was like the Vision OS app that I worked on. But I do not own a Vision Pro as yet. TBD there.
TBD. I guess one of the final questions I want to ask is, so as you know, when it gets into software engineering, there's so many different languages. Can you tell us like what is the core difference between Swift and something like Python or Java? Like, what do you say, having worked with it so intensely, what do you say is like the major difference? And then I have one more question from DJ after that.
Yeah, one of the big differences is Swift is type safe, right? So in Python, you could do things like change a variable type, right, on the fly. In Swift, you declare a variable as a string; it's a string forever. You can't change it. So type safety is huge as far as like Swift goes. I guess that's why you have JavaScript and you have TypeScript, right? So JavaScript is less type safe or not type safe, but TypeScript is this layer on top of JavaScript that makes it type safe. So those are the differences. And as far as like quick to learn and popular, Python for sure, right? Because Python and AI is like, you know, milk and chocolate or whatever the analogy is. But those are the differences one of the differences that quickly jump out at me is the type safety.
I'd see. I didn't even know that, but that's very interesting. Did not know. So DJ now asks, where do you find tutorials for frameworks for making Vision OS apps like Reality Kit, Scene Kit, etc.?
I'm gonna plug Hacking with Swift there because when Paul Hudson really dove that deep into Vision OS. So if you're looking to do anything with Vision OS, I would say definitely just jump on YouTube and just Google Vision OS Hacking with Swift. And then you'll get a lot of tutorials from Paul Hudson on that. I think Apple has a few as well, but Paul has videos, like walkthrough videos, where you could walk along with like Reality Kit syncing. Well, yeah. So I'll definitely plug Hacking with Swift by Paul Hudson there for that.
Okay, well, that was really good. Very good answer. So I guess the final question that I want to ask before we leave off here is, so this is something that was asked behind the back channel, but how do you approach design scalable systems for larger projects?
Design scalable systems for larger projects.
Yeah.
In what context are we asking this?
I think design systems in particular.
Oh, okay. So, well, I don't work on our design systems, right? So that's like one of the beautiful things of having all the teams working on that. We have a design systems already, and as a matter of fact, we have a newer, more modern way of approaching that using view modifiers. So I could just like have a dot typography and just put in whatever the token is. So with that, the design team basically is working on the design system. So that system is part of, like say you're working on your Figma design, all that is already part of the design system. That's pretty cool. Recently noticed there's a disconnect between weather information and turning it into things people can use every day. Cool. Yeah. I love the app. I mean, I use it more when it's cold for sure, but when it's summer, it's awesome. But when it's cold, I'm just like, how do I dress?
Well, so we're at time. So again, Alex, sensational presentation. And again, guys, if y'all want to connect with him, he's shown you how to connect with him. But please don't just blindly connect. Please say a message. Say, I saw you at Mentor Me Collective's speaking event or any other place that you met with him. But he's such a sensational orator, and he gave you a lot of free game for how to get into iOS development and engineering. So just want to give you your flowers, man. You did an excellent job here. There was a depth of information that I think people are excited about. We even had somebody say, like, I want to build something with Vision Pro in the interior design world. So, and I think that's through you just giving people information. So, thank you so much for like just taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you for giving to the community. Y'all been a great audience. We're gonna have Alex here more often. So please, once again, connect with him and continue to support him in the event. And we have a couple of more events that's coming on later on this week. But thank y'all all for coming out. We appreciate y'all, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. We appreciate you, sir. All right, then. On that note, everyone have a good evening, and I'll talk to y'all later.